a little more time tonight so that we can enjoy ourselves a little bit more tonight. Thank you very much, our bright, sprightly, energetic, and confident new chairperson from St. Augustine, Renuka Segram Singh Suklal. Give the chairlady a round of applause. Isn't she a talent at the microphone? She's a talent in the law office, in the courthouse. She's full of energy, and we're so happy to have her in the campaign. Tonight, I want to ask your permission to acknowledge my cabinet colleague, Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, and the next Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, the Minister of Health of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Terence Dayal Singh. My colleague, soon to be in the Parliament with me representing Barataria San Juan, which has not been with the PNM for a little while, but welcome home Barataria San Juan, Jason Williams. Tonight, on this platform, there are 4 PNM candidates, 4. I'm leading the team, and I'm the oldest dog in the hunt. But I probably have the keenest scent. And my colleague, who had the responsibility that most ministers of government never had, the responsibility to look after the nation's life and livelihood in a pandemic, something that happened 100 years ago. Thanks for a good job, well done. Behind me, on this table, I have TUNAPUNA's proud Member of Parliament, who served not only the constituency, but like every other PNM candidate, we come to serve the country. And Esmond Ford was asked to serve in the Parliament as our Deputy Speaker, and he has done a distinguished job. He took to that job like a duck to water. He was trained very quickly, he learned very quickly, and his voice was just perfect for the job. Even the ill-disciplined in the Parliament knows when the Deputy Speaker says, stop, you know you stop. Esmond, thank you for a very good job. So our country's business, if only on these 2 tables, our country's business is seen to be serious business in the hands of serious people. And I want to say to you, all of you, as I greet you at home, abroad, those of you following us on the live platforms, whether you're listening to the radio, looking at the television, or watching the stream, I want to tell you, without fear of contradiction, none of these candidates have made any deal with me or anybody in the PNM for the position they now hold as PNM's candidate standard bearer for the general election. In the PNM, we have a screening committee spelled out in the Constitution. The political leader does not select the screening committee. He gets a screening committee depending on how the party elections go. Our party elections involve 1 man, 1 vote. Every party member, as you know, you can vote for your party officers, and a group of party officers, about a dozen of them, make up the screening committee. And we changed our constitution to allow that screening committee not to be a support group for the political leader who had a veto. A few years ago, under my leadership, we changed that and allowed every member of the screening committee to have his or her individual vote on that screening table. So as a result of that, there's no chance of the PNM's candidate being my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my neighbor or my cousin. None of them. They get there by being the best candidate by virtue of merit in this party. So, ladies and gentlemen, children, all, we woke up and welcomed 2020. Old Year's Night. Cast your mind back to where we were Old Year's Night. How many of you were drinking and singing all lang syne and misbehaving and carrying on and kissing and hugging up all year's night. We were not to know that 2020 was going to be such a year. 2020 is a year that none of us will forget. We'll tell our children about it, but we hope that all of us will survive it. We lost 8 lives, and those families are still hurting, but remembering that, as my grandmother said, when I was a child, my grandmother always told me, especially when things didn't go well and I was upset, and I thought it should have gone different. She always told me, no matter how bad the situation is, it could easily have been worse. And this is one of those situations. You only have to look to see what other people went through and say, there, but for the grace of God, go the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Once again tonight, I want to thank all those in the national community, especially our healthcare givers, who rose to the occasion and guided us through this process. I've heard it mentioned that this is as a result of the good work of leadership done by the Prime Minister and his team. That is true. There's some good work done there because we had to make some significant decisions. But look back a bit further, a little bit further, and there would have been a time when some good work was being done by those who manage this country's affairs, mainly the PNM, to have systems in place to train our young people, give them opportunity to be educated, let them choose their careers, and so on and so on and so on. And then there came a day when we needed the input and the guidance, the mettle and the skills of our healthcare givers. And the population suddenly discovered that at an earlier time, we had invested properly, we had behaved properly, and we had a full-fledged, international standard trained healthcare sector that could defend us. During the early part of the scare, I spent a lot of time talking to people abroad in the United States, in what is now the areas that are in serious difficulty, the South and the West. And when they spoke to me about our situation, and I was talking to them about our situation here, very many of them asked me, how did you all know how to do what you did? I said, well, we got good advice. And they followed us on our external platforms, and they saw every day different doctors and the leadership under Dr. Parasram, and they saw the qualification of our people. And many of them could not believe that those people were existing in our healthcare system and just came to the fore as required. They thought we imported them. And when they saw their qualification, they asked us, how did we know to have people trained like that in a little island in the Caribbean? And I said, this is Trinidad and Tobago, this is Eric Williams' country. Yeah, we were taught and always knew that education was important. Education was a vehicle. Education was an asset. Education was a ladder. And maybe in this room, every one of you that I'm looking at here tonight, you had put your foot up on some of the rungs of those ladders. If not you, your children. That's how we lived in Trinidad and Tobago. Sparrow sang Calypso in 1962. Tell the world there's a model nation at last. We were on our way. And in 2020, we proved that Trinidad and Tobago is a model nation. We said that this threat is still with us. Some people don't believe. Some people think that we are using it for other purposes. But today, we were a little shaken because we got a result today which is not one that we've been accustomed to, and is one that could be a harbinger of some things to come. Hopefully it is not bad, but we are prepared. The reason why we kept our hospital system the way we kept it, that in the event that we get to a situation where we have sick people, that we can deal with it. It's when you can't deal with the sick that you have that you got the real problem. Right now, we can breathe comfortably that if something happens and we begin to get a few more or many more sick people, that we have a response that we can make. So we are still with the pandemic. The experts are telling us that it could be with us for a little while still. We're not going to walk away from it and say, okay, breathe easy, it's gone. So what we did from very early is to understand that we were in deep water. And eventually, we're going to get out of it. And when we get out of it, we need to know what direction to go, need to know what to do, and what resources we have available, but we must get out of it first. And that is why very early in the game, you would have heard me say that I appointed a committee of some of the best skills in a wide cross-section of activities and experiences. 22 of our best talent, men and women, from labor to business to the university, those 22 people were asked to work as a team to prepare a roadmap for recovery, because we knew that we were being damaged. Our economy was being hurt in a serious way. And when it's all over, we would need to recover, because we know in Trinidad and Tobago, our anthem tells us that we operate with boundless faith in our destiny. So we know that we are going to have to recover after a bad experience of COVID-19. This team, during the early parts of the COVID, they met, these 22 leaders, and they consulted 120 leaders in various subsectors in the country. And they prepared this document, which I've laid in the Parliament. This document is the roadmap for Trinidad and Tobago post-COVID pandemic. Now, we didn't have this last year. We didn't have this the year before. We didn't have this in January or February. We produced this document. It's post-COVID-19 pandemic. So it's the first response of our best talent, answering the question, what do we do? How do we do it? And you see, the Deputy Chairman, Brooks, when he handed this to me on the 4th of June, so by the 4th of June, Trinidad and Tobago had this roadmap document, phase 1. And it says, submission of phase 1 Road to Recovery Committee report. And it contains the inputs of a 22-member committee, 100 co-opted members on our numerous subcommittees, and spontaneous contributions from the national community. That's what it is. Over 100 people or subsectors took part in giving their inputs, distilled by these 22 people who we could easily call them experts, because they were all invited there on the basis of their known quantity. Other people who are offering you another plan for Trinidad and Tobago, who job that plan? And then they're admitting to you that the plan is a rehash of the budget speech. One member of my staff did an exercise to compare all the offerings of this plan that the other planners have and the budget speech of the opposition leader last year, October. And approximately 75% of that plan that is being offered in those advertisements on television, what they call Woke Nation, about 75% of that came from the budget speech from last year, October. Well, one thing for sure, he didn't have no COVID last October. He had none in November, none in December, none in January. So that could not be a response to COVID. I don't know which bar they drink up that in, but that is not a COVID plan. This plan came about after COVID claim. And that is why I could take you to the table of contents, just the table of contents. And it says, there's an introduction. Point 2, context. Prior to COVID-19, an economy on the road to recovery. Very early in the proceedings, the economy. An economy on the road to recovery. You will hear sometime before we finish this election campaign, the Minister of Finance will come on a podium, as ministers have been doing night after night, and he will give you a detail of what we had to do in the economy to keep the economy on life support. On life support. The Minister of Finance will tell you that. So keep your ears open, people. But early in the proceedings of this roadmap, we talk about the economy on the road to recovery. But the first thing after that is, where does our economy lie in the global context? Because the economy of Trinidad and Tobago is largely placed in the international market. Our major owners, LNG, methanol, oil, urea, and things like that. They're all sold in the international market and other aspects of our economy. Caribbean Airlines, an airline that for the first time had made over $100 million profit last year, 2019, whereas before it was making a $500 million loss. And was looking forward to a brilliant 2020. Caribbean Airlines. The world tourism industry has ground to a halt. Cruise ships are now having a gloomy future, if any at all. Hundreds of thousands of planes are on the ground like Caribbean Airlines is. And our Caribbean neighbors, who are our main market for our manufactured goods, one of them saw a reduction in their government earning, their state earning of 75%. Because they were so heavily dependent on tourism, which depends on planes to bring and take tourists, that when that grounding of the aircraft around the world took place in the region, they suffered a 75% loss of their earnings. Many others suffer significant losses and don't know how they will recover, because we don't know yet when that industry will be restarted. And Trinidad and Tobago is looking on to see whether they will be able to buy our manufactured goods in any significant way. So you look at the international global forecast. Before COVID, the projection for the global economy, what we woke up with early in 2020, a global economy that had performed, it had grown by 2.9%. The projection for 2020 is a decline by 3%. The world economy. So when you hear that China has problems, and Korea has problems, and Europe has problems, and America has problems, the net output of all of that in terms of the world market that you have an interest in and the growth of the economy of the world is that instead of having a 2.9% growth as it did, we're now looking at a 3% decline. That's a gap of 5%. It might sound small in number, but that's a huge amount of economic activity that will not take place. You know that here in Trinidad? Because you would have seen the price of oil collapse. The price of oil didn't collapse because people no longer knew what to do with oil. It's just that because of what's happening out there. There aren't so many millions of cars driving around the world burning fuel. And because of the lockdown that has taken place around the world, many industries have not been primed up again, so therefore the energy that they would use is not required. So the price of LNG has gone down because not that amount of usage is there for it. We are in the oil business, we're in the LNG business. And of course methanol In the same business that we are in, that is what has collapsed in that way. Of course, in some of the more advanced economies that were projected to grow at 1.7, they grew at 1.7% in 2019. For 2020, they declined by over 6%. That's a gap of over 8%. Huge. And of course, for 2021, in the global economy, given where we have sunk in 2020, and the turnaround that's anticipated, because we won't always stay down. The economy is going to get back up in the world. And the projections are, once the virus has been beaten and recedes, the world economy will kickstart again very quickly. Human life will go back to some semblance of the way we used to live in being alive and needing things and consuming things and so on. So they're projecting a growth in 2021 of 5.8% in the world economy. And of course, in advanced economies, they're projecting a 4.5% growth. We are in a group that is called emerging markets. Small and energetic, have some strength still, and even though we were growing in that group, Trinidad and Tobago was not among the highest growth there because we were so heavily dependent on oil and gas that when the collapse started in 2014 and all the way down, we were still struggling to find growth of over 1% in Trinidad and Tobago. But the projection for growth in emerging markets and developing economies for 2021 is good. They're projecting a 6.6% growth. Well, Trinidad and Tobago can't say that we are going to expect that. But if we go, growth is this year over last year. If last year we were 10 and we go better than 10, you compare the next year with the year before. So wherever we end this year, once we are not as infected to have to close the economy again, and outside markets are beginning to pick up at some time next year, we expect that we will be able to turn around the direction that we've gone in 2020. So while it has been very difficult, it is important that we focus on a positive future because there are opportunities coming our way. So ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about our roadmap, we talk about employment, 2.2. Energy commodity prices, always important to us. Have to keep our eyes on that. COVID-19 public expenditure. You know what that means? That's the billions that we had to borrow in February, March, April, May, June, July. Additional borrowing, because remember, we already had some borrowing in the budget of October 2019. We were aiming to borrow $5 billion to add that to our revenue and then service our budget going forward. But COVID made additional demands on us. You will hear from the Minister of Social Development and Family Services how many tens of thousands of persons we had to give cash to. You would also hear that police looking for a handful of people. And of course, this being our experience in 2020, in our roadmap, you will see talking about the socio-economic impact. Now, every one of you here could write an essay on the impact of COVID on you, your finances, your family, your future, and all of that. The socio-economic impact. What did COVID do to us? What demand did it make on us? What plans do we now have to change? What plans died? And what new plans arose? The socio-economic impact. That's the story that you will tell at the personal level. And of course, you will know your government is managing our business at the national level. In an economy where the government is the driver of the country's economic engine. Your circumstances, just a little microcosm of the country's circumstances. And of course, the next heading is the new operating environment. Who could tell us that when this is all said and done, when it's all over, that we are going to be operating in the same environment? No. We will be operating in a new environment. And that is why you need to have leadership. You need to have leadership that could chart a course in this new environment to even take advantage of the setback. How many times after a hurricane you have to rebuild? Every time. Go to Tobago, and the one thing you'll notice in Tobago is the quality of the housing in Tobago. Ever noticed that? Tobago boasts the best quality housing across the island, anywhere in the Caribbean. You know why? Hurricane Flora in 1963 flattened, break down, push down, lean down the houses that were there. And Tobagonians, with government help in most instances, major program under the NHA at the time, Tobagonians rebuilt their houses. And as a result of that, they built new, strong, bigger, better houses. Let us do that now with COVID-19. What the document talks about the objectives of the roadmap. 4.1, objective number 1, social protection, leave no one behind. The Minister of Finance used whatever resources we had very early in the game, got into the international market, we borrowed in the local market, we used the resources we had to make sure, especially those persons who were least able to look after themselves, that in this period of challenge and difficulty, that we left no one behind. Everybody was catered for. From the multi-million-dollar business sector to the family with a challenged child, to those who suddenly lost their job because you were told to go home and stay home and don't come out, and you didn't know where your next pay packet was coming from. We left no one behind. And the next item in the document says, retain and create jobs. Every single person on the government payroll kept their job during COVID-19. And we kept on engaging ourselves in the development program of the country as we created jobs in the development program. When we came back out to work carefully, gingerly, we came back out and continued our rebuilding. And of course, there were serious disruptions. And we talk about minimizing those disruptions. In our roadmap going ahead, how do we do it? What do we spend all that money for? All the monies we spent in the various subheads in the Ministry of Social and Family Services, out of the Ministry of Finance allocations, we spent it protecting the vulnerable and the displaced, using the social safety net to build a stronger Trinidad and Tobago. Otherwise, some people would not have made it at all. We hear the complaints, you know. We know that will never be enough. We know we'll never please everybody, but what we do know is that once I hear in you, you're alive. You're alive. It doesn't matter what you're saying. Doesn't matter what you're saying. Go to Bergamo in Italy and let them tell you about the morning COVID came, when the town could not manage the amount of coffins. They had to call in the army to help them handle coffins. That's their story. Talk to your family abroad now in the United States and let them tell you how they're living. Let them tell you the fare. Look at the television. See what the politics is like there. We talk about expanding the scope and focus of the social protection programs. We had a social protection service system in this country, where approximately 6% of the national budget was being spent on handouts to people getting support. That may have to go to 9% during this period. But we do what we have to do to keep all our people safe. And our people not easy, you know. Our people not easy, you know. You know them. They're outside. They're crying, they're misbehaving. We are empathetic, we are sympathetic. You bring them home. They know when they come home. To keep all of us safe, you have to go into supervised quarantine. You know, when they get here, all of a sudden, they're bad. They don't want to cooperate with the Ministry of Health. They don't want to follow the quarantine. They don't want to go into quarantine. Some of them in quarantine, they want to go and visit their family while they're in quarantine. Quarantine means stay there and don't come out. You understand? But you know, that's our people, right? If you, with all this COVID story, you know, if we're crazy enough to say let's have a carnival tomorrow, it will be the biggest carnival in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, you know. And if the police had not been very vigilant, we would have been having a serious number of COVID parties because they're having them, you know. I'm coming from Maruga the other night, 10:30, I'm in the back of the vehicle reading. When I look up, I'm past, I don't know where I am. It's dark, and I look outside. I see a bar. Inside the bar, full of people. In the street, full of people. Endless cars down the road, and people dancing in the street. 10:30, you know. Bar should have closed since 8 o'clock, you know. But so far, so good. It has not had the kind of negative effect that we're talking about, but let us not push our luck too far. Right? So I come back to where we're going, right? With respect to the disruptions, health first. Coming back out now, Coming back out. Because this document is being prepared early in the proceedings when you locked down. So we have to come back out. As part of the roadmap, coming out onto the road. We talk about adopting workplace protocols for the safe return to work. Go to many workplaces now. Not the same thing. You see protocols there, all meant to keep us safe. Some of them quite elaborate. Some of them, as you approach the premises, you have to sanitize outside the premises. These are requirements to keep us safe. And it's working, because the doctors and the GPs around the country telling you they have been seeing far fewer people with flu-like symptoms, not just COVID, other flu-like symptoms, because cleanliness works for all of us all the time. We are cleaner now. We want to keep people in jobs. We got to work while the threat is still there. We can't just lay back and say, well, it's got the better of us. So we talk about increasing spending in the construction sector. Prioritize, of course. Some projects may no longer be as priority as they were before because things have changed. But the construction sector is a sector which allows us to keep people in jobs and to provide opportunities for more jobs and to do so productively. So you will see, even as it is difficult in this period, you will see us still doing construction in the country for the reason, one, we're building the things that we needed to have, and in so doing, we occupy our people productively. If we don't do that, where then? Where then do they get jobs? On this platform of the PNM, we're good, but we're not magicians. Those magicians who are offering you 50,000 jobs, they have a means of giving you that. They have a lot of money to bring back. And I suspect they intend to bring back some. That could create a lot of jobs in this country. So they could talk about 7,000 jobs or 8,000 jobs, and they can't tell you how it's going to be funded. But of course, Providing appropriate relief for business enterprises, small and medium enterprises. When the Minister of Finance speaks to you again, he will tell you in detail again how much support we provided for small and medium enterprises. For the big companies, all those who are borrowing a lot of money in the bank, the first thing we did was to get the central bank to lower certain reserve rates, to allow them to get money cheaper, to be able to lend cheaper, we hope. And of course, the government was owing a lot of VAT that was being repaid very slowly. It was a bone of contention. This VAT debt was built up over a number of years. When we came into office in 2015, the debt of VAT was $4 billion. And every year, you keep adding on to it and you keep paying some out. But because of COVID and because we wanted to have high liquidity in the country and to allow business to stay alive, to keep your job, because if the business house closed down, you have no job. So when you see us helping the business, we're helping the employees. We paid out immediately $700 million in VAT refunds up front to those smaller amounts. And then the bigger amounts, as Minister of Finance sometimes, I have to ask the Minister of Finance again. Let me hear it again. I see a document and I read it again just to make sure I'm reading it right. $2.3 billion in bonds going to the business sector, and these bonds are tradable. Government-backed bonds, government debt, but debt that was owing and that would not have been paid so quickly, but we had to pay it now to keep the business sector alive and well, so that when you come out from the lockdown, you have a job to go back to. Imagine those people in the few instances where the business owners took the decision that it was not worthwhile to try to continue, or that the losses were too great to be overcome, and they closed the door of the business. Think about those people who had a job in February, in March, when we locked down the country. And when you come back out now in June or July, the business no longer exists. I receive on a regular basis the odd person who would have got my phone number and would write me a note telling me how the circumstances are and they need immediate help. I can tell you, in every instance like I get something like that, I WhatsApp it straight to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, and she acts on it immediately and brings some relief to that family, that person. Yeah, that's in place in Trinidad and Tobago. In some countries, it is not even thought of far less to be in place. And we give priority to families with children. We give priority to the elderly. Don't sell our country short. When we say we're not leaving anybody behind, we make the best effort to let that be true. And of course, we focus a lot on sustaining economic activity in energy and energy-related industries. Some people hate to hear us talk about energy. But we don't and can't run away from the fact that the vast majority of our revenue dollars come from the energy sector. We do have some other strong sectors because in the period of difficulty between 2014 to now, the non-energy sector has been stepping up. When in 2015, we moved into 2016, and we had a loss of $20 billion because of the loss in energy revenues. If you look at the performance of the non-energy sector, you will see that government revenues in that sector was quite significant and it grew. So don't let people encourage you into believing that we do not and we have not made progress. We have made some progress, we are making progress, and we just have to stay the course as a disciplined people and strong, tough people get out of difficult situations all the time. We provide appropriate financial relief through banking and insurance institutions and credit unions. Many people do their banking in the credit union, which is a multi-billion part of our economy. We put $100 million in the credit union for those persons who go there. And we give the credit union an arrangement where you can lend this money quickly to the small borrower at very, very favorable interest terms. Most credit unions are involved in it, and most people who use credit unions, they will find that there's money there available. So you don't go and tell them, we have no money. The government put $100 million there. Right? For those who are exporting, right, and require a small amount of, or even more than a small amount of US dollars, depending on what you're importing, right, and what you're exporting, we put significantly more US dollars in the Export-Import Bank, so that in that Exim Bank, you can get that support. So the government was out there, stretching a hand to everybody. And of course, Tobago is peculiar. Like the rest of the Caribbean north of us, Tobago, its economy is twofold. Tobago's economy is government employment and tourism mainly, and a small amount of agriculture. Agriculture being much too small, of course. But in the meantime, Tobago had been taking on with some tourism. Guess what? Cruise ships, 0. Planes, 0. Hotels, closed. The private hotels in Tobago, closed. And the government put, is it $50 million? $50 million. $50 million towards sustaining them, creating some employment in the area and allowing them to be ready for whenever the industry opens. The Magdalena Hotel in Tobago, the largest hotel in Tobago, owned by the state. The government was saying to the private sector across the country, don't send home your workers. Try as hard as you can to keep your workers on the payroll. Make that your contribution to this pandemic fight. And many, many businesses did that. Some small, some medium, and some large. I've spoken to small businessmen who spoke to me from the heart and said, I couldn't see my workers go home and know that they don't have a pay packet to buy food for their children. So I kept them on knowing that I'm running debt that I don't know how I'm going to pay. They've told that to me. Because there's a relationship between the manager who owns the business and the workers who come there. A personal relationship. He couldn't see them starve. Some people have done that. But the government kept the workers on at the Magdalena. Because we couldn't ask the private sector to do it and not do it in the public sector. So the Hilton workers, the Magdalena workers, the Hyatt workers, the government kept them in their job and nobody was paid to send home. So when you hear 2x4 rum shop politicians talking about the government is heartless and the government this and the government wicked, they just have nothing useful to say and you just get rid of them because they're just insulting your ears. In Trinidad and Tobago, we left no one behind. So that was the scenario in the pandemic. First, you know, every single request of the Ministry of Health got a positive response from the cabinet which I led. Even though we were there, already prepared, and already had a system in place, when we looked at it again, the ministry came back and said, we need X, Y, Z. We had an additional $150 million to make sure all our health hospitals had everything. You look at television, in the richest nation in the world, they were in garbage bags in the hospital. They were washing face masks and renewing it. That didn't happen in Trinidad and Tobago. There was enough personal protection equipment in Trinidad and Tobago so our doctors and nurses could do their job with dignity and efficiency. There were people in this country who could not believe that that was happening, so they went to court to make a case that the chief medical officer was lying, that people were dying and they were giving wrong data and wrong information. How many times have they gone to court? 17 times. 17 times. And you know what's bad about that? Every time they go to court, You, the taxpayer, have to hire lawyers to go there and defend the truth. And it costs you millions of dollars because lawyers don't come cheap. And if they lose, it doesn't cost them a cent. But if they win, it's a money-making business for those lawyers. I live in a house with 3 lawyers. So I love lawyers. So, but I just tell you that so you can understand that not all of us see things the same way. And as we go past that confirmation that we are in a pandemic, we're now talking about what happens in the future. What does the future hold or look like for us? So that brain power we brought to bear in preparing this roadmap to recovery. We talk about building a digital nation. You know what a digital nation is? It's a nation that is committed to using digital technology to conduct its business. And I here tonight tell you, that is where this country is going. COVID has broken our nation. When we build it back, we're not building back the same old business and the same old nation. We had already begun to look in this direction, but we must accelerate it in such a way that by 2022, Trinidad and Tobago would be clearly a digital nation. What digital technology allows you to do is to be far more efficient in everything that you do. Our young people, many of them, have already been trained, and all of us now live on our cell phones. I don't know how much you know how reliable, how reliant we are on the cell phone. Ever lost a cell phone? Anybody ever lost a cell phone? You know that feeling? All of a sudden you feel like you are lost. Everybody is disconnected from you. You can't remember any phone number because you no longer memorize phone numbers. You have my name in there. But that cell phone, that package of technology in your hand is so powerful. So we have already digitized the Attorney General's office. All those hundreds of thousands of files that people will keep in drawers and have to turn page and the dog-eared and they could tear out page and they can't find the file and they can't find the actual file in which cabinet, and then something that should take a day or half a day takes a year. Some things are lost permanently. Some people have left the job 6 years ago, they can't get a gratuity because 2 years of service in some ministry can't be found. The digital technology allows that to be a thing of the past. You don't have to go and line up to pay a bill. You can stay home and on your phone in the digital era, stay home on your phone and do all your transactions like you could do your banking now on your phone. All the filing that is done in the government for record keeping can be done using technical arrangements that are allowed by modern technology that are virtually available to everybody with a cell phone. And this country must move in that direction, and that is where the roadmap to recovery is taking us. Interestingly enough, before COVID, we had taken this decision. And we looked around the world to see who was doing it and who is a model that we could follow. And we found a country in Europe called Estonia. It's about the same size as Trinidad and Tobago in terms of population and about the same size in terms of economy. And they have gone totally digital. And what that does, it allows you to identify people as unique individuals in the society. So you have what is called an e-identity. So you have an identity number, and that is used to take you wherever you go. You go to the licensing office, you go to the hospital, you apply for a birth certificate, all of these things, and it is so easy to do. And what digital technology does, it allows you to keep a record. Easy record at your fingertips. I went into a hospital in Brooklyn a few years ago with the local congressman to show me how they operate that hospital in terms of the handling of patients and the handling of medicine and everything in the hospital. On every ward, there's a kiosk. And you enter the kiosk by entering your code as an employee, doctor, whoever goes in there. And as you go in, you are identified and recorded as to who opens and what time. The nurse takes out the medicine, it's recorded. The doctor makes the prescription by the bedside, it goes straight there, and the nurse reads it and follows it. No mistake. And as for pilfering, your name and your location and the time you thief it will be there. And of course, if you had 20 ampoules inside there, you don't wait until the 20 go out and say, well, we finish, let me go and order now. Somewhere on another floor, but connected digitally, somebody is watching the stock and realizes when it has to be restocked and knows exactly how much more medicine is inside there and knows exactly which patient got what. So this is what the digital technology brings to us. But to do that, you need a whole mass of people with the skills to operate that system, and that is where our young people come in, and that's where the jobs are going to come, by operating the country differently. And we are on the road there. We have 3 universities in this country. And our young people, 3 universities, we have Costard. Recently, when we opened Cuba Hospital last year, and using it as the center for before COVID, we are using it for the MRI and radiology and so on, right? Because when I went in there, all technicians, mainly women, of course, because the men have not yet stepped up. A lot of young women. And every department I go into, there were our young people who are the operators of and the users of these high-level pieces of equipment, which are now in all our hospitals around Trinidad and Tobago. And I got to ask them, where did you train? And the vast majority of them were trained at Costard. We have it in our country. Let's use it. We're building back the country differently. I go up to USC in Maracas Valley, and I'm talking to the students. And I'm surprised that there's a nursing program up there. And I talked to them, and then I discovered it's not just a nursing program, but it's a nursing program as good as or better than many in the Caribbean at USC. Outside of the government system, we do have a nurse training program in the government system. But at USC, there's a program as well. Our young people are being trained. And I'm saying to Trinidad and Tobago tonight, let us use the COVID disruption to steer Trinidad and Tobago in a different direction. And let us all commit tonight to make this country a digitally operated country. I was on a farm a couple days ago, and the farmer tells me that he is expecting to bring in a milking parlor, which would operate in such a way that the milking of the cows would be done digitally, computerized, and you get all the data from butterfat in the milk to how much milk the cow produced, how much feed the cow ate, and you know which one to keep and which one to get sent to the butcher. All of this, and I know it is true, because I went to a farm like that in England a few years ago, and I met one man managing 75 milking cows in a farm. And while I was there, a car drove into the yard. It was a technician who came to find out if everything with the technical aspects of the farm was okay. And the answer was yes. He jumped in his car and he gone to the other farm. If they needed help That was how it came there. New jobs are available, good jobs, jobs that support productivity, not jobs that just be on the payroll and producing nothing. This country has to improve productivity, and a digital country, it forces you to produce. Because the record is there. So we are training our young people to change the country. And it calls for political will and political leadership to put our next generation in a position to run this country. I believe in young people, and I've always done so. Because some people had believed in me. I was in Tobago in a THA election 2 elections ago. And I remember when Ansel Dennis was chosen as the PNM candidate. He was 22 years old. I spoke about 20 times during that campaign, and every night I made it my business to address the young people in Tobago. And I said to them, as I'm saying tonight, young people, come forward and take responsibility for your country. Today, Ansel Dennis is the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly. When we screened in the PNM in 2015, the Tobago PNM produced 2 young ladies, one for Tobago West and one for Tobago East. In Tobago West, they produced Shamfa Kojo, and Tobago East, they produced Ayana Webster Roy. The PNM won the election, and the people of Tobago held me responsible for molding and monitoring and developing those 2 young ladies. Today I could tell you, they have matured and they are available for many, many years of service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I see my job and my responsibility as the oldest member of Parliament. I've always seen my responsibility of providing a good example to young people. Michaela Pandey came to the Parliament as the daughter of Basdio Pandey. I was introduced to her the first day she got there. And she spoke to me as a youngster. I spoke to her as an elder. Up to today, Michaela gone from party, close of the party. She still calls me sir. Always refers to me as sir. And I am very happy about that. Because you see, there are some people who believe that only the bad things are worthy of your attention. Whoever said that life is going to be a bed of roses? But you can always smell the roses among the thorns. You can always do that. So ladies and gentlemen, a section of this book, section 7, managing the fiscal crisis. You know what that means? Fiscal means how you get in money and how you spend it. The fiscal year is your budget year. Fiscal incentives are things you give so that they cause people to do things and the government may or may not get a return out of it. The fiscal crisis that we're facing is that we have been forced to spend more money on the expenditure side than we can expect on the revenue side. You could do that for a little while. You can't do that as a sustained model. We already, even before this PNM government came into office, we were already lopsided on the fiscal arrangements. The last government pushed the expenditure side up, until it got to $63 billion. And many of you were in the band, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. And you got it. You got it. But every time you get it, remember, the expenditure side is growing and the revenue side is shrinking. That is the fiscal crisis in Trinidad and Tobago. And then add to that the coming of COVID. where we had to go more on the fiscal side, on the borrowing side. You had to borrow. So when you hear demands being made, just understand that no matter how big the orange is, you can only squeeze so much juice out of it. After that, you get into the rind, and we are very close to the rind. But your government can do more with less. And your government must do more with less. And this government has been doing more with less. And on that basis alone, we are the right choice. In this period, you want responsibility. You want responsibility and you want discipline. When I took this job, I took the responsibility for this country, and I've been a responsible prime minister, and I've led a disciplined government. The first thing we did was to reduce the size of the government itself. First thing we did, reduce the size of the government. And in this very difficult, most difficult period starting September 9th, 2015, we have not had an easy day. Public servants, we fought to keep you in a job and you got your salary every month on time. State enterprises, when we were confronted with the behemoth of Petrotrin, we had to make a decision. It was not a popular decision. It was not an easy decision, but we did not make it capriciously. We looked at the problem step by step. It took us 2 years. From the day we came in until the day we took the decision that we have to do what had to be done because the country's finances were threatened. I know that there are people out there going to the polls to vote against this government because we closed down Petrotrin. But the rest of you whose future had been secured by that restructuring of Petrotrin, you go and vote too. You gotta vote too. $850 million we couldn't pay because there was no discipline. There was no responsibility. Other leaders kicked the can down the road. I had no road to kick the can to. $850 million with a date to pay it. I had to find $2.6 billion to pay the workers who were going home. Some of them came back into jobs. 800 of them came back and got jobs. And today, the restructured Petrotrin, Heritage is paying its taxes, servicing the loan, and making a profit of almost $1 billion. You, people of Trinidad and Tobago, it is your decision whether this government continues or you go following people with a stupidness about reopening Caroni. You know, that is so inanely dotish. Let me remind you all why Caroni was shut down. Caroni was shut down because the European Union and the United States had stopped paying the preferential price that they were paying to allow Trinidad and Tobago to pretend to be in the sugar business. That's what it was. But the one, I want to know where that story comes from, and then somebody tell me molasses doesn't make rum. I am offering you here the roadmap, post-COVID roadmap, from the brains, the minds, the experience of our country, who tells us where this country is going to go, why we should go there. And you're going to tell me you considering Kamala Prasad Bisesa and David Nakid, them going to open back Caroni, and they're going to open back Petrotrin. We shut down the refinery, people, not because we are against refining or the refinery or refinery workers, it was because the refinery was engaged in a business. One, we never had enough oil to refine. We were having to import every day 120,000 barrels and refine it in our refinery and lose up to as much as $70 a barrel. Stop and think for a minute. 107,000. Let's say we're losing this month $5 a barrel on the refined product. 120,000 by 5 every day. That is the guaranteed loss. When we examined the company with the best examiners, they said, look, the best outlook we have going forward is a loss of $2 billion a year. You know how much $1 billion is? $1 billion is $1,000 million. And you analyze your own business, it's your business, petrol is your business. And you see that the best it will do going forward is that you would lose $2 billion a year. And you're telling me, leave it so. Leave it so. I have no doubt that by fixing it, we have offended some people. But patriotism is about putting your country first. You know, I'm trying to find something on my phone for you, right? But like it's hiding. Let me find it. I really need to find it because I don't like to misquote people. I don't like to misquote people, so I really must find it. But while I'm looking for it, you know, there are some famous quotations in the world. One of them, you know, Winston Churchill said in his long career, you know, in politics, or wherever you are in your long career, sometimes there's one statement you make that's so profound, it describes you, right? And it depicts you all the way, and it becomes you. Winston Churchill said, you know, he said so many things. He said if the empire should last for 1,000 years, men should say this was their finest hour. John Kennedy, he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. Dr. Eric Williams, he said to the children, our future is in your book bags. Eva Perón said, don't cry for me, Argentina. A.N.R. Robinson said, quoting his mother, said, streams flow into rivers, and rivers flow into seas. Richard Nixon said, I am not a cook. And David Nakid said that the UNC cannot lead Trinidad and Tobago out of a paper bag, far less to lead the country. Aren't those famous quotations? And interestingly enough, you know, Churchill started with a C, Kennedy with a K, Perón with a P, Nakid and Nixon with an N. It must be the N, right? It is the end of David Nakid after he beats up with Edmund Ford. Because Patrick Manning said, we're going to beat them in the East, we're going to beat them in the West, we're going to beat them in the North, we're going to beat them in the South. And I said we're going to beat them on the foot sole when they start to run. And you see, in this period of difficulty, When we just came out in 2016, we struggled the end of 2015. You know, that famous governor of the central bank went to him and said to him, quite triumphantly, you have money to run the country for 3 days and they're not turning off the tap. What he didn't tell him, and they're not going into the parliament as a UNC senator. You understand? He expected that the tap would have been turned off. And then he and his leader would have been in the parliament telling you how bad the PNM is. Not that they had ruined and wrecked and stolen up the country. But thank God, we prevented all of them from turning off the tap. And of course, it took a little while for us to move from where we started to where we wanted to go. And for a year, they entertained themselves by saying, nothing happening, nothing, as if, you know, we are magicians. Nothing happening. You bankrupted the country. We have to pull the threads together. We have to find out what you have done. How many mornings we go to the cabinet to find out a $500 million there, another $800 million there that we never know about? But just as when we thought we had things going evenly, we go one morning to hear, hey, all you owe us $200 million US. You're going to pay us in 14 days, otherwise we'll default the country. That is a loan that they had borrowed. And the loan had a clause that if the country was ever downgraded, the loan is callable. Right? Remember we got a little downgrade a time back because we had lost our oil and gas revenue. The minute that downgrade took place, the holders of that bond, $200 million US. We're struggling to make ends meet. Money for 3 days. And the bondholder said, we want our money and we want it now. You have 14 days to pay it. Your Minister of Finance, with good advice and good help, was able to pay that money and still keep this country on an even keel. They were coming to the parliament on a regular basis, seeing that they were borrowing. The overdraft was right up to 99%. We had public servants to pay, medicine to buy in the hospital, public debt to pay, maintenance on our equipment. And they come to the parliament and they have 45 minutes to talk. And they spend 44 minutes. Why are you borrowing? Why are you borrowing? That one called Wade Mark always have concerns. He has concerns. He has concerns. He never had any concern when Kamala Prasad Bisesano, bags of bandit, the cabal, was wrecking this country. He never had no concern. He came to the parliament one day. I moved a motion. I moved a motion in the parliament one day with documentation to show that at FCB, the Minister of Finance in the UNC government had questions to answer about insider trading. And after I made the case in the parliament, they were required to respond to the document. When the parliament resumed, to my shock and horror, the speaker, Wade Mark, got up and entered the debate. Something no presiding officer must never do. He entered the debate with a document saying that the Chief Justice write he and tell he that the matter was sub judice and therefore the matter can't proceed in the parliament. I tell him you lie. The Chief Justice had to write after and say he knows nothing about that letter. The Speaker of the House of Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago lied to the Parliament to prevent a debate where a Minister of Government had to answer for public money in a state enterprise. Wade Mark had to apologize to the Parliament. But now in the opposition as a senator, he has concerns. He has concerns. He has concerns. That matter cost taxpayers $400 million. And those who were liable for that money was allowed to walk away because they belonged to Trinidad and Tobago high society. Sometimes my blood boils. But I keep my peace because I know somewhere in this country there's a little boy or girl depending on me to speak for them and to protect them. told Tobago and told you last Sunday, I read from the Guardian. I read from the Guardian how you, the public of Trinidad and Tobago, were the subject of a $500 million scam which flowed out of the treasury in 1 month. I was reading the papers and I made the observation whether those who were responsible for that kind of action in the cabinet, who are now in line to say they want to go back to the parliament, and I'm asking you again, do you think those people would lift a finger to allow you to get justice in that? And then Moonlal going to sue me. I would love for Moonlal to sue me, so that the evidence of that period of our history would be the affidavit in the courthouse. I would love for him to sue me. Because at least the people of Trinidad and Tobago in a judicial process will get chapter and verse and have the witnesses come in an air-conditioned room with a judge sitting down there and tell you exactly how $500 million leaked out of the treasury of Trinidad and Tobago. And while all that was going on, everybody was getting a bit of what we were doing. Nothing happening, nothing happening, nothing happening. And of course, you know, they can't please them. In one breath, it's nothing happening, nothing happening, nothing happening. The government incompetent, the government incompetent, the government incompetent. Now, at the 5th year, at the end of our term, every day they're opening something, every day they're opening something. Well, if there was nothing to open, nothing was happening. But if so much was happening, that we have so much to open, then obviously they were lying. Right? And if it is opening every day because it is for elections, it means it's something good. Because when you see it, the only way you will vote for it is because it is something good. So let's go around the country, right? The nation's legacy buildings, Whitehall, Queen's Hall, the Parliament, President House, they left them to rot. When we came into office in 2015, those buildings were not in the state that they are in now, a state of complete repair and perfection. Today, President House and the Parliament meets in the Red House. And they had budgeted, if they had ever been allowed to continue on the Red House, they had budgeted to do the Red House for $400 million more than we did it. Today, you're taking it for granted. The Red House renovation has been complete and improved under the same government. When you pass down the road, you know, take it for granted. Now you're passing the QF roundabout, the QF overpass. Take it for granted. That is $300 million more than it was being done for, and it wasn't there when they left office. It's there now. It's there now. We built it. Chaguanas Ring Road, to reduce traffic in Chaguanas. We did that. Arima Hospital, they're telling you they built it. Yes, one called Roger Samuel came there to demonstrate with a sign that they built Arima Hospital. All they did was choose the site, grade the grass, and have a sod turning ceremony for the election of 2015. We built that hospital. The loan, in fact, there was no loan in place to build the hospital. We had to struggle. They had awarded a contract, so the contractor was on site. We went and we continued the process and built it largely out of the current account. Today, Arima has probably the finest hospital in the country, but they're all not competing. Sangre Grande, when they had the 5 largest budgets in this country, Sangre Grande Hospital was still close to a cowshed. Even though the staff in there distinguishes themselves by being known to be about the best in the health service in Trinidad and Tobago. Sangre Grande Hospital staff, doctors and nurses, are about the best in this country in terms of patient care. They didn't see it fit to build a hospital there. One is under construction now, though. Sangre Grande is getting its hospital. We are leaving no one behind, COVID or no COVID. The people in Toko, Cumana, Rampanalgas, Montevideo, and as far as Matlot, they got to pass Grande to go home. The road is being upgraded. It is being upgraded. It is being done now. Kumuto, linking Kumuto to Sangre Grande and to Arima, a highway that they block it for a year. Courthouse again, they love courthouse, you know. Take it to the court for a year. Contractor on site. They had to pay the contractor liabilities of $20 million more because they're going to court. We eventually won the case and continue with the road. Very soon that's going to be finished and open. At the other end of the country, the people of Diego Martin, from Maraval to Carenage, from West Moorings to Goodwood Park, from Four Roads to up the hill, way up in the bay, we now have the Diego Martin Sporting Complex, one of the finest in the country. Marcus St. Joseph, you got your hospital, you got your police station. So did Besant Street. And the police station in Carenage that the police walked out of and abandoned the Carenage police station and walked to Four Roads. Carenage police station is about 80% complete now. And the old police station has been converted into one of the finest homework centers in the country. That's what this government does. And all of this being done in a time of great stringency. But we are doing more with less and making sure that taxpayers' money is spent for the taxpayers and on the taxpayers. A few weekends ago, my colleague and I, we commissioned in the St. James Hospital a machine called a linear accelerator. Cost $84 million. That is a machine that allows us to provide patient care and treatment for cancer patients in the public sector. World-class treatment that you get now in St. James. We did that during a period of low revenues and shortage of money in this country. We did that. And of course, the Carenage Fishing Complex has stood there and watched me for 5 years as we were discriminated against because the government of the day decided they're not doing it. It's complete. It's finished. It's there. It's in use now because we did it. This government did it. We built the overpasses on the highway. One in Diego Martin, one by the Parliament building, the towers at the end of the Barren Lara Promenade there, and one on the highway here. We built them. We built them. All of these things being done at a time when money was hard to come by. Well, you know they say wise men came from the east, so they end up in the west. So in the west, we now have West Park, Savannah. It's a pleasure now to pass West Moorings and see all the people from around the district doing their walk around with the children, with their grandparents. Open Savannah, built, constructed, and the trees have started to grow because we have now got West Park in the Western Peninsula area. Because we are leaving no one outside and no one behind. The Point 14 people got their hospital, and they are getting their highway. All of it being done during this period. In Moruga Tableland, last week, I had the pleasure of opening an agro-processing and technology park, and the agricultural sector is eager to get in there to make full use of it, to give us food supply, food security, and processed food for export. Cost $90 million. So while we're spending $90 million on that to diversify the economy, and we're receiving report of some man under our house in Barbados who got $177 million to be an agent for boats that they bought for us. We went to the Australian government because they were misbehaving so badly here that it was always a priority for us to get ferries for the Tobago Trinidad link. But we just didn't have the money. We're borrowing to do all kinds of things. We couldn't borrow to do everything. And in some instances, you just had to postpone it. But postponing the improvement of the ferry service to Tobago was not an option for us. I met Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull in London at the heads of government meeting. And I know that Trinidad and Tobago and Australia have a very good relationship. Australia is one of the few countries that we work with, or who is our friend and not neighbor, but friend in the Commonwealth. They carry a surplus in their budget because of a strong economy. They're great enough exporting of LNG and metals and food and so on. So Australia has a surplus, unlike us who have to borrow to meet the levels of our budget. I went to Prime Minister Turnbull and I told him about our situation here in Trinidad and Tobago and what a ferry service will do for us. And I asked Australia to help Trinidad and Tobago. Prime Minister Turnbull immediately took his phone in front of me and called the foreign minister who was also there in that meeting. They called Australia, and before the meeting was over, he told me Australia will help. I had an invitation at an earlier time to pay a visit to Australia, invited by the Australian government. I did not go because we were busy with other things here. I took the opportunity to travel to Australia on that invitation the following year. And the Australian government at the level of the Prime Minister, saw that his government made available to Trinidad and Tobago two things. One, out of the export bank, they made funds available to pay for our two ferries. So it's Australian government money from the government agency that is funding it as a loan. Is the same company that was used to fund the purchase of the Express and the Spirit. Those are used boats, but they came out of Australia and they were funded in a similar way. And because we behaved well, they were able to draw to my attention that we had serviced those loans so well that it should not be a difficulty extending loan to us for the new ones. And that's how we got those new ones. There are two companies in Australia that build those kinds of boats. One, Austal in Australia, and Incat in Tasmania. We put both companies to compete against each other to make sure we get the best price. And the competition was fierce because each one wanted to get the job. We got the best price from both of them. And we gave each one, you build one, and we had the price. So one is being built by Incat, the other being built by Austal. And there was another facility the Australian government had put in place just before we got there. And we were the first to be allowed to access that facility. And that facility was specifically to purchase Australian military equipment. We needed offshore patrol vessels. So we took the opportunity to dip into that and to get the Australians to build for us 2 offshore patrol vessels. So we have 4 vessels being built in Australia. 2 to put an end to this ferry nonsense between Trinidad and Tobago. The same people who ran the Spirit and the Express into the bottom of the ocean. When we came into government, we had to take them out. We got 1 extension from the insurance. And when you go for another one, they say, no, those boats have to be taken out of service because they are not fit to be allowed further passes to go forward. The Express was so bad. We couldn't fix it because the cost of fixing it was so great, we had to sell it almost like scrap. We fixed the Spirit. It should have taken 9 weeks. It took 6 months. But it has since been properly repaired and is in service now. But for the first time later this year, a brand new ferry bought for Trinidad and Tobago will arrive in Trinidad and Tobago. It's called the APT James, named after a famous Tobago parliamentarian and patriot. And that will be the solution to the problems we had. And later on, towards the end of this year or early next year, because they've told us recently that it appears as though they'll have to have some delays because they too are affected by the COVID out there. So there's some delay out there. So the second vessel would be due here sometime, I would say early in the new year. And then we would dispose of the Spirit. And of course, Trinidad and Tobago would come closer because these vessels, they're new, they're faster, and they're far more comfortable than anything you ever had before. That's what we're doing for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But you know, when we did that, and I announced this every step of the way. Every step of the way, this government announced it. But we might have concerns. You know what those underminers did? The first thing they did, they wrote the Australian opposition, seeking to incite them to attack the Australian government for helping Trinidad and Tobago get those 2 ferries. And when that did not work, they wrote the Attorney General of Australia making stupid allegations about concerns that they have of corruption, implying that the Australian government led by Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is involved in corruption with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. That is the UNC. So why were you all surprised when they spent the last 2 months in Parliament and all now trying to get the Americans to put sanctions on Trinidad and Tobago after the lion barrier? Those people wrote the Australian Attorney General seeking to implicate the Australian Prime Minister in wrongdoing, and all he did as a big sister Commonwealth country was to extend the hand of help to Trinidad and Tobago. And they always call him Dennis Moses' name. Moses, 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 Moses. They don't have nobody in their camp like Dennis Moses, doing his job quietly and effectively. And that is why tonight I could tell you, if you're concerned about your business, if you're concerned about your interests, if you're concerned about your children, if you're concerned about this country, you'll stay far, far, far from Kamla and Weidmark. You know, the people of Tobago, they too were getting something in this period. Last Sunday morning I went to Roxborough and I met the Roxborough fire station. 96% complete. It's finishing this end of this month. I toured the Roxborough Hospital, which is 40% complete. When the country had money, they didn't produce any of this. Talking about work nation and creating jobs. Every project I mentioned here had a huge job opportunity component in there. As it said in the roadmap document here, use construction because construction allows us to build the country, to create jobs, and to produce something of substance. So when we spend the money, we get something for it. They spent the money. What did you get for it? What did you get for it? I can tell you tonight, people of Trinidad and Tobago, there was no bagman in the office of the Prime Minister since September the 9th, 2015. So there's nobody now having to explain to the bank where they got those millions from. Because you see, money always comes from somewhere, is somewhere, and going somewhere. And as the Attorney General always says, in this government, follow the money. And that's why some of them are so desperate, because the trail of the money leads to a place they don't want to go. There is nobody of all the people who served in my government, there was nobody in this government who at screening is told that you cannot go forward any further. Thank you for your service. You will see a number of our persons have been changed out. Not one of them could have had a story to say to me as political leader, if I don't get to go, I got to talk. Talk to your wife when you go home. Talk to your husband when you go home. But you're holding no secret for me. I saw Jack Warner tonight identifying himself with a Dutch government inquiry. Apparently, as Prime Minister, I'm not supposed to tell you about your business. The Dutch government came to us and told us what criminal investigation they are conducting in Trinidad and Tobago's purchase of those vessels that the last government bought, which we paid for largely. And they're doing it because they've seen huge commissions and suspect that there's wrongdoing. I told you that in Tobago last Sunday. And they said, I didn't call Jack Warner name. They said, I'm Minister of National Security. Tonight, Jack Warner on TV identified himself and accusing me of calling his name. He said, I'm Minister of National Security. I didn't know it was he. But hear his story. Hear his story. That happened 7 years ago. I didn't know that fraud had an expiry date. As far as I'm aware as a lawmaker in this country, there is no expiry date on fraud. You think Jack Warner knows that? If something happened 10 years ago and you discover it now as fraud, it's as fresh as a daisy. But his argument, like Munilal, is that that is a long time thing. It's 5 years now, nobody can talk to me. So because police can talk to you for 5 years, it's all right. That's okay. And the government has no right raising it now. You understand? That is the kind of talk you're hearing from the opposition that conducted your business the way they conducted it and telling you now they want to go back to government. It means that they refuse to accept that something was wrong. And that means if they get the opportunity again, they will do it again. That's what that means. There is no condemnation for wrongdoing on their part. Otherwise, they will not be so chummy with Watson Duke on a rape charge while you want to be Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And they would not allow a man to be chairman of a corporation while he's charged for corruption. And some of them on criminal charges. But the way they speed into the courthouse, you would think that they have a little iota of shame. Them in the courthouse every day calling other people's conduct into question. This country will survive. I have every confidence that Trinidad and Tobago will survive, but not on those standards. Not on those standards. You have to hold yourself as disciplined and teach your children about discipline. Otherwise, we just become normal passenger pigeons, destined to die like the dodo, or like as you say in Trinidad and Tobago, dead like a semp with your foot up in the air. We will avoid that. Our children's future is bright. Our young people in Trinidad and Tobago must know that in a difficult time, there was strength, there was resolve, there was commitment in the government and in the country's leadership, and that keeps our country afloat. They must know that. Our young people must know that the government is leading them in a direction where the skills of the new era is going to give them opportunities that I didn't have, that my grandfather didn't have, but which is theirs. And they must grasp it with both hands. They must have confidence to know that all of us must demand a share of what this country has to offer. But we must get it honestly, we must get it fairly, and we must be humane. Because if COVID has taught us nothing, it has taught us that we are our brother's keeper. So, fellow citizens, the election is upon us. The election is a selection process. It's not about who could promise you more, who could give you more. It's about who could take this country in the right direction and make the best of a bad situation. Fortunately, we have laid a good foundation. Fortunately, we have behaved well in the last 5 years. Fortunately, you still have in office, offering itself for service, a government that believes that it is the servant of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and taxpayer money is not yours to put in your pocket. We are respectful of our people, and we are respected by all people. So when we say Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign country, we mean that. We have had to deal with some difficulties that others never had to deal with. Today, we can point to success in those areas. One such success is keeping our country safe in a pandemic. Another one is keeping our country safe from a Venezuelan migration, while we managed to keep within our border 16,000 Venezuelans, showing them the milk of human kindness. We are able to confront the criminal element in this country because we know that it is our men and women in uniform, police officers and other agencies, who have to confront the criminal element. And to lead the charge, you need a commissioner of police. We did that in the parliament without their support. We know that if we're going to fight white-collar crime in this country, that a scourge in this country, you had to have laws to fight white-collar crime. We've passed a suite of legislation, and the law applies to every one of us. And anybody who you see have a problem with them laws, them is people to watch. So tonight, I ask Barataria, from the hills to the lowland, to support Jason Williams in Barataria. I ask TUNAPUNA to take pride in the son of your soil. Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, served you well, serving his country well. Send back Edmund Ford to Parliament. I tell St. Augustine, you are not condemned to what you've been accustomed to. Yes. St. Augustine, you have a chance to put somebody in government this year. You have a chance to put somebody in parliament, in a party that is responsible, a party that is caring, a party that is careful, a party that breeds patriots for Trinidad and Tobago. And there can be no more great patriot than this young lady, Renuka Segram Singh Suklal. St. Augustine, she has come highly recommended. And you must take a stand. You must take a stand. And my friend, the number two there, I'll sing in the family. The number two there, I'll sing in the family. You have done us proud. Throughout the Caribbean, my colleague prime ministers talk about the health minister in Trinidad and Tobago as though they know him. Because I could tell you, a lot of what went on in fighting COVID up the islands in our CARICOM territories, they took their timing from Trinidad and Tobago, from the Ministry of Health and the CMO of Trinidad and Tobago. So, ladies and gentlemen, it cannot be said that we are the same. It cannot be said that the results of the last 5 years in the last government is the same as this government. Our results are better. Our time might be more difficult, but our results hold the best chance of getting the best outcome for the years ahead. Join us with this roadmap on the road to discovery, so that we could secure a future for our young people and a more comfortable living for all of us. And when it's all said and done on the 10th of August, when you would have done that, and put the right choice in government, we will all together take a deep breath so we can shout loudly, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.